Welcome back to my YouTube channel and to my train room. If you are watching last week, you will have seen me construct a signboard for the roof of National Widget. This week I'm going to work on another rooftop detail. So let's turn the camera around and get to work. Well, the next thing I'm going to work on is an air handling system. I figure that since National Widget uses a lot of chemicals, some of them may be toxic, and therefore it's going to need a much bigger than normal air handling system on the roof. This is very straightforward. I'm going to build a basic box out of 60 thou styrene. I have some various detail parts. I have here air intakes from a diesel shell, a Lego block, and some grill panels. And then for louvers I'm going to use clapboard siding. I've got two different sizes here. I've got the 30 thou spacing and 40 thou spacing. I haven't decided what I'm going to use yet. But the first step is to build the styrene box. And I've decided I'm going to have these 4 turbines at the top with a couple of grill panels underneath. So I've marked out my blocks accordingly. I've scored it, and now just snap all the pieces apart. Now 60 thou styrene may be overkill, but the reason for doing it like that is that it's thick enough that I don't have to worry about bracing it. Well, I decided that my 4 fans look best in 2 groups with a gap between them, so I cut it in half. I framed it with some 40 by 40 styrene strip, glued the grill panels on. Now I'm making louver panels for the end. I decided to go with the narrower spacing, the 30 thou, and instead of doing one big panel, I'm doing 2 smaller ones separated by a rib. So they're going to go on like that. It's pretty straightforward. For the most part I can make it up as I go along. The trouble with this very closely spaced clapboard siding is it's difficult to tell which way up it goes. Of course, on the plus side, if I do get it upside down, it'd be difficult for anybody else to tell. As you can probably see from this, I'm cutting all the strip oversize for the time being, and then once it's set up I will cut it to length. You may notice that my whole supply of 2x6 is in short lengths. That's because I'm using up all the offcuts from the signboard. So by putting lots of framing strips and stuff on like that, it breaks up the flat surfaces and makes the whole thing look a whole lot more detailed. I'm going to let that go nice and hard before I cut everything off the length. So don't go away, I will be right back. I've built the roof as a separate sub-assembly. I started off by figuring out how much I needed for a small overhang all the way around. Put the Lego brick in the middle, and I put a grid of 2x6s on edge as stiffening ribs. and that just needs to be glued on there. I also raised the whole thing up on a plinth about a scale foot high because I think it looks better than sitting straight on the roof. And now I've just got to center the roof on the assembly. I'll tack it to start with, so I've still got a little bit of adjustment, and then when I'm happy with the alignment I will glue it all the way around. Okay. And apart from paint, that is now finished. So after the complexities of the billboard, this was a very simple project. I think it took about 2 hours start to finish. The next rooftop detail I want to make for National Widget is a system of air ducts. Now the first piece I'm going to do is a large section. I've got this, represents about a 4-foot square, and I go from a point behind the air handler disappearing down in the roof just before the elevator tower. Now normally what I do with these air ducts is to cut them into scale 8-foot lengths and then add squares of styrene between the lengths to represent some kind of standing seam. And I might do that on some of the smaller ducts, but for this one I think I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to put it in one piece and then just wrap small styrene strip around it to be a flat seam. So let's get this cut to the right length. The actual length is not critical since it's going to be disappearing behind the air handling system at one end, and the other end isn't critical either, as long as it's somewhere near the elevator tower while still giving workers space to walk. Now I need one of the corner sections. For those of you who are interested, I did a how-to video on making these parts some time ago, and that needs to get glued on the end there. I think I'm going to do a standing seam at this end, because otherwise it might not be accurate enough. And now I'm going to use this really small styrene strip. It's 10 by 40 thou, and I'm just going to put a couple of regular flat seams on here. I need to make sure they're square. And now I need pieces a little bit more than that. As with most things that I do, I'm cutting them oversize, and then I will cut them to length later. I've just done the front and the top and bottom. I don't need to do the back because it would be impossible to see it. I probably didn't need to do the bottom either, but I have. And now I need to build some legs. They need to be nearly 5mm, so I'm just going to get some 3/16 I-beam and put those under it. So let me go find that and I'll be right back. One of the disadvantages with keeping about 100 different sizes of styrene strip in stock is that it takes a while to find it. I could just make a framework to go under it, but since this I-beam happens to be exactly right, I'm just going to use that. So there's the main duct, and now I'm going to add some smaller ducts branching from it. This I think is 10mm square, which is a little under 3 scale feet. And here I'm going to use the pre-cut 8-foot sections. Well, as I said earlier, I was going to have to go to plan B with the junction. So I've put a 45-degree piece in, and that's just going to get glued on the side there. I had to trim the heel off here, and now I need to cover that with a piece of thin styrene. Once again, as with most things that I do, it's oversized. I will trim it off later. Because that is the best way of getting a nice neat corner. And this one, I think I'm going to install it, instead of at the bottom, I'm going to bring it up to the middle, which means that the smaller duct has slightly taller legs. I'm going to make frames out of L section. Yes, I could buy angle, but I just make my own out of 2 pieces of styrene strip. Here I'm using 2x6 and 2x4. It's a bit fiddly to get started, but once I get them tacked together, it goes easily. Well, I've made a full 14-inch length of angle stock. It's way more than I need for this project, but I'll just keep it on hand for the next one. And I need at least 4 legs on this. Not quite sure how long they have to be yet, so I'm just going to cut them more than I need. They have to drop down and meet the roof. I'm thinking I should attach these 2 pieces first, and then with it on a flat surface put the legs on. So let me figure out exactly where this needs to be glued, and I'll be right back. Well, I have a little bit of tolerance. It doesn't have to be exact, but it needs to be somewhere near the far end of this middle section. I think I want to run one more duct branching off from the top of this curve and going into the elevator tower, because I think that would be a good location to run all sorts of utilities down into the building. Well, here's my air duct finished, apart from paint of course. I decided not to bother to trim those top angles off. My thoughts are that when it was being installed, the offcut would be worthless for anything, so the installer probably wouldn't have bothered to cut it to length. It just used the pieces that was left over. Well, here it is positioned on the roof, and I think that adds a lot of interest to this area. Well, that completes this week's installment. Next week I will work on some of the other details. I hope to see you then. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.